I want you to take this idea a step further and think about, over the last 19 months, how have all of the stressful thoughts that you've been having been changing your chemistry and your physiology? There's been a lot of change and unknown and ambiguity, which has allowed our imaginations to kind of run wild of like, oh, what if this happens? Worrying about this, the anxiety, how those change your chemistry and your physiology. So I'd love for you to just reflect on, how has all of this stress that you've been dealing with been showing up on a physiological level? So what I'd like you to do is, in the chat box, just type in, what have you noticed over the last 19 months? Maybe you've been having problems sleeping. Maybe you've noticed a change in the types of foods or beverages that you've been craving, the amounts. Maybe you've been having headaches. You've been having muscle tension. You guys, stress is not a psychology problem. Stress is a physiology and chemistry problem, which really ends up showing up in a lot of different ways. It really goes back to our ancient, primitive biological hardwiring. And in a very simple way, here's how this works. So let's just say we happen to be in a state of balance, but we experience a stressor of some sort, and immediately stress hormones come squirting and spraying all over our insides. And one of the things that these stress hormones do is they release energy from storage sites around the body into the bloodstream very, very quickly in order to fuel our muscles for either fighting or fleeing, an intense bout of physical activity. When we get this intense bout of physical activity, actually burns off the stress hormones, produces another subset of hormones that for now we're just going to call the bliss molecules. But what these bliss molecules do is they actually neutralize the stress hormones, and they return our body and brain back to a state of balance. This is an amazingly designed system, because the end result of a stressful event is that you do return to a state of balance. But there's a critical step within this process, the step that I call play it out. The actual fighting or fleeing. In our modern day and age, it's inappropriate. And so a lot of times we're exposed to a lot of stress, and we're forced to just sit there and take it. And so what happens is, we are not burning off those stress hormones and getting the bliss molecules and changing our chemistry. We're really disrupting this system at its most dangerous point, is when we're really kind of stewing in a toxic broth of dread, because if we don't burn off that cortisol, it just continues to circulate and recirculate throughout the body. And it can really have some devastating consequences. So one of those stress hormones is cortisol, and it does do some good things in the body. It's not horribly evil. The problem is that when we have it in the body for extended periods of time, but cortisol affects every system. It affects our digestive system. It affects our immune system, cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, even our reproductive system. But cortisol also really messes with our brains. And our brains are brilliant and complex and amazing. We're just going to keep the brain super simple and talk about it in two major parts. So the very first part of our brain that developed is what I call our primitive caveman brain. And I like to think of this as this guy, his name is Sneaky Pete. So this part of your brain is your fight or flight response. You and your safety are his number one priority. He's very reactive. He's all about taking action. And he's also very emotionally reactive as well. So one of the things about Sneaky Pete is that we could not have made it this far in our survival without him, but he is this primitive guy now living in this very modern world, and there's often a disconnect with sort of like his skill set. So Sneaky Pete is always hardwired to be negative, defensive, to always assume the worst. He's always focusing on the problem instead of the solution. This part of our brain is also really lazy. It's hardwired to conserve energy. It always wants the easiest default option. And this part of our brain hates change. It loves habit and routine because you expend less energy when it's just a habit. You don't even think about it. But there's a lot of like safety and predictability and control with habit and routine. So we all have our own Sneaky Pete. He's got his advantages, he's got his disadvantages. As our brains continue to develop, the neocortex developed on top of Sneaky Pete. And I like to think of this part of our brain as like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. So he's the physicist who's unbelievably wicked, smart, logic, reasoning all day long. This is the part of our brain that's about self-control and willpower, can project into the future. This is also where we relate to our sense of purpose and our beliefs. But this part of our brain isn't perfect either. So Sheldon, with self-discipline and willpower, it is a very easily exhausted resource. It's a lot like a muscle. Like the more you use it, the more tired it gets. This part of our brain, rational, thoughtful, is often overridden by Sneaky Pete and emotion without us realizing it. And this part of our brain is incredibly energy expensive. So this is actually not the default setting for our brains. Sneaky Pete is the default setting. And just to review, Sneaky Pete, like nowhere on this list is any sort of logic or reasoning. This part of our brain has no capacity for thought. It's just emotional and it's reactive.
Hey, I'm headed out on my run now. Hey, wait! Where are you going? Season 3 of my favorite show just came out. Plus, it's kind of cold out there. And you could totally just do it later. Wait! I know what we can have. Oh, we got Snickers and we've also got some chocolate chip cookies. We got chips, we got rice cakes, and I have those. Oh, and that.
So here's the thing, in order to have more consistent access to our advanced brains that we all need to do our jobs well, we actually have to correct our chemistry so that we then actually have access to our psychology. So the stress response hits, cortisol is released, we don't have access to our advanced brain. So what we first need to do is correct our chemistry so that we get Sneaky Pete out of the driver's seat, and then we can address things from a psychology perspective. So all of the micro strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you over these sessions will be doing both. They'll be changing your chemistry and your physiology and then helping to optimize things from a psychological perspective. All right, so I said Sneaky Pete hates change, resists it. He's like a donkey. So the micro strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you, ultimately, they're behavior change strategies. So when we change too much, too soon, Sneaky Pete freaks out and is like, I'm not doing it. So what's more effective and efficient is to shrink the change down to make it so easy that a caveman could do it. Thanks, Geico. So all of these things that I'm going to be teaching you are simple, easy things to do. And I know you already have like a bonkers amount of things on your to-do list, both professionally as well as personally. So the last thing I'm going to do is add more stress. So I know that you'll find these things really infinitely doable. So since you all said like, yeah, this looks pretty easy to do. I think we should actually do a microburst because I'm sure you have experienced a bit of stress already today. Okay, we're just gonna do 3 microbursts. We're only gonna go for 30 seconds. I'm gonna give you some different intensity options. I know some of you literally just ate. So if you're like, this is not a good idea, I'm not gonna do it, you don't have to do it. Some of you also, you're like, not really wearing the most appropriate pants. If you want to turn your camera off for this, you can totally do that. But what I'm going to ask you to do is stand up. We are going to microburst for 30 seconds. The music will start. That's our cue to go. And when the music's done, the 30 seconds are over. So the first microburst is jump rope, only it doesn't exist to get all caught up in your legs. So if you want, you can do a low impact version of this, or if you want, you can go ahead and bring that intensity up. So you're not gonna need a ton of space. Look at you, you're already going. Okay, start the music. Let's get going with that 30 seconds. So this is where you can pull out all your really mad jump roping skills from when you were younger. Like you can crisscross. What we're going to be talking about today is how we can change our chemistry by tapping into our sense of beliefs and purpose. And we're also going to be learning that the tapping into beliefs and purpose and really getting clarity and connection to that is a great way to manage our energy. And in fact, the energy that comes from our sense of purpose and beliefs is one of the most powerful sources of energy that we possess as human beings. Research has shown that purpose is essential for resilience, and that people who lack clarity on purpose and mission are more prone to anxiety and depression, and they are less resilient to traumatic events. So our connection to purpose and beliefs is sort of like our advanced brain's superpower in order to overcome Sneaky Pete, because every time we think about purpose and mission, when we write about purpose and mission, when we speak about purpose and mission, it changes our chemistry. We get serotonin, we get dopamine, we get endorphins. And what these chemicals do is they make us feel happy and confident. We are more focused, we're more productive, we're more goal-oriented. Research shows we're less prone to anxiety and depression, so we feel more calm. It also makes us more extroverted because when we're on a mission that matters, it matters. And so it gives us the motivation to really put ourselves out there and get things done. So I do a fair amount of coaching with executives that on paper, anybody would say like, wow, super successful. But a lot of people come to me because they're like, okay, on paper, I am really successful. So why is it that I'm not happy? Or why do I have so much anxiety? Or it's people that are going through change and transition, or they are just feeling stuck. People come to me for all different reasons, all genders, industries. The very first thing that I do with every single one of my coaching clients is I have them get clarity on their purpose, their mission, and their beliefs. And y'all, it never fails to blow my mind how quickly they go from feeling overworked, overwhelmed, overstressed to completely clear, on fire, on purpose, and on their game. It is game changing. It is life changing. So this question of, what is our purpose or what is our mission? That's a really big kind of stressful question that Sneaky Pete is like, I just do not have the time and energy to really think about that. So what I found is that breaking this down into the simple question of what do you believe makes this a more easy and approachable process. So when I talk about the fact that, when we get clear on what we believe, and then we start making decisions in alignment with those beliefs, it brings a great sense of integrity to our lives, where we start feeling like what we're doing matters and that we're not just sort of like these hamsters stuck on the wheel. So when I talk about what do you believe, here's the things that I'm really asking you to think about. And I'm just going to give you an example of some of my beliefs to get you thinking. Okay, so one of my